Glad to have you with us. This is Business Incorporated on Channels Television. I am BC Adebayo. On today's program, IMF releases new report in Nigeria 24 hours after President Buhari presents Budget 2020 to the legislature. An Institute for Fiscal Studies warns a no-deal Brexit will push UK's debt to £100 billion. Plus, Saudi Aramco prepares to file IPO papers by the end of October. We'll begin the show right away with the market. And here in Africa, the numbers were mostly lower at intraday. The Nigerian All-Share Index was down more than 1%. And in South Africa, the JSE Index also slipped 0.13% at about midday Nigerian time. Crossover to Egypt now, where the index plunged lower at 1.13% at intraday. Kenya closed its trading on Tuesday up 0.37%. In the Middle East, markets were also largely lower as the Abu Dhabi indices fell 0.33% at intraday, while the Dubai index rose 0.48%. In Qatar and Saudi Arabia, both countries also traded lower as the numbers declined 0.72% and 1.11% each at intraday. European stocks reversed course to trade higher this morning despite fading hopes of an imminent resolution to the US-China trade war. Paul Brits is waiting to tell us more. For Paul, let's begin our conversation with the first speech of Kristalina Georgieva as the head of the IMF, where she warned that trade wars, geopolitical conflict and Brexit could lead to broken supply chains and compromise global growth. Now, what's her plan of action?
Well, I think the first thing in her plan of action is creating awareness. She did point out that the situation has changed a lot in the past 2 years. When we are looking at 2017, 75% of the world was headed for growth and for increasing growth. Now, over time, the situation has slowly gotten worse and worse. And now we're at looking at an expectation of 90% of the world slowing down in growth in 2019. That's the estimation by the International Monetary Fund. She's calling this a move from synchronized growth to synchronized decline, and is blaming trade and geopolitics mostly for this development. But instead of addressing those responsible for trade and for trade relationships, she's going for a different idea, for a different approach, saying, well, even if that is going on, things might be helped, and that's through different policies. In some countries, at least, she's calling this one as well a synchronized effort on policy to combat this synchronized decline. The idea is that more government spending pro-growth and a taxation that's more pro-growth might help the situation. Mind you, in countries that are doing well, however. She did single out Germany, the Netherlands, and South Korea, where investments that have been, where there's a backlog, in Germany at least, for example, in infrastructure, could really help to boost the economy as a whole. Here in Germany, internet connectivity, for example, is a big factor. Investing in that could not only bring company contracts, it would be the building block for the service sector, for example, to build more business. And if more than one country, if a joint effort of countries would do this, the hope is that there will be a ripple effect helping the global economy overall.
Well, the US and China just can't seem to get along. Now, millions of sports fans are caught in a fight between the NBA and Chinese broadcasters over in Hong Kong protest. Now, is this another costly fight for both sides?
Yeah, principles are costly, and they're costly for both sides once again. It all started when the club executive of the Houston Rockets, that's an US NBA team, sided on Twitter with pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong. That Beijing did not find very funny or very great. There was complaints, and it was asking the NBA to apologize, or him to apologize, but instead the NBA backed the executive, saying that it stood for free speech, and that got the ball rolling. Chinese broadcasters first stopped broadcasts of Houston Rockets games, and then said they would stop broadcasting NBA entirely. Corporate sponsors also canceled their contracts, which is a big deal. In China is a big market for the NBA. It is expected or estimated around 20% of the NBA's revenue is made in China. But it's already starting to backfire on the Chinese side as well, because Tencent, the Chinese broadcaster, is now faced with a lot of fans saying they want their money back because they've been paying to see NBA sports games, and now the broadcaster is taking that away. That resulted this morning in a drop in this Tencent stock, so that's backfiring already. And some say that the NBA, unlike many other U.S. companies like Apple or Blizzard that has come into criticism from Beijing, the NBA is much stronger than other companies, because you may be able to replace, a technology firm or someone else, but the NBA is very, very hard to replace. Just to show you how much of a big game it is in China, in 2012, just before Xi Jinping took over power, he went to Los Angeles and cheered on the Kobe Bryant and the Lakers. It's very deep-rooted in Chinese culture, has developed in the last 30 years, and that's very hard to be going to be very hard to replace.
Now, in other news, Paul, the EU's antitrust chief has warned Silicon Valley companies of tough times ahead, and she's saying that she'll move beyond competitive fines in her second term, that's if she's confirmed, to ensure a fair playing field. Does that mean we might see her breaking up tech giants?
That's what you might expect, and that's what a lot of policymakers are also probably hoping for, but the short answer, probably not. Vestager has been really, really active in fighting big technology companies from the US, mostly with fines. Last summer, she slapped Google with a fine of $5 billion US. But did notice that just the fines alone aren't really working. There need to be other changes, other measures to really make a change in the market and bring competitiveness back. One attempt was that very same incident where she forced Google to unbundle Chrome and its search apps from the Android, from its Android phone operating system. That could have been an effective measure, but it did come too late. By that time, Google had already established its market dominance to such a degree that it was impossible for any other company to step in there. But we'll see many more of these measures, and probably earlier and earlier stages of monopoly problems or of competitive problems with big tech companies. She did address this issue of breaking up companies directly, said it is a possibility, it is still a possibility, but she's obliged to use the least intrusive measures that she has and she can find in order to reestablish competition. So it might be the last call for her, but for now she's going to stay with other measures combined with more probably huge fines.
We're also waiting to see that as well. Thanks, Paul, for those updates, and do enjoy the rest of your day. The Institute for Fiscal Studies says a no-deal Brexit will push UK debt up to 50-year high, with borrowing likely to rise to £100 billion, and total debt will soar to 90% of national income, according to the IFS director, Paul Johnson. With the extraordinary level of uncertainty and risk facing the economy and public finances, the government should not be looking to offer further permanent overall tax giveaways in any forthcoming budget. In the case of a no-deal Brexit now, Mr. Johnson says the government should implement carefully targeted and temporary tax cuts and spending increases where it can effectively support the economy. The IFF forecasts that annual borrowing will top £50 billion next year, and that will be about 2.3% of the GDP, a measure of national income. And Juliana Olayinka is ready to give us more information about this latest development and other market headlines. Juliana, how are you doing today?
Very busy, I must say. This Brexit story is taking a life of its own.
Yes, indeed. And we're talking about the Brexit. Now, what reactions are you getting following the Institute for Fiscal Studies warning on a no-deal Brexit?
Well, it's really interesting because I must say in the UK, Bissy, you know, every 15 minutes, the top line of this story is changing, whether there's a working lunch, there's a tweet or there's a meeting. But yes, the Institute for Fiscal Studies yesterday, just before that showdown phone conversation between the German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, they released data saying that in the wake of a no-deal Brexit, that public borrowing of the government would increase to about £100 billion. Most of the public kind of knew that this was the case. There was, of course, a couple of months ago, the release or the expose of Operation Yellowhammer, a document that the government had put together showing just how serious the economy could get in line of a no-deal Brexit. But lots of City analysts have laid down details and specifics of this report. When it pertains to the economy, lots of money is going to be put towards the border, that's Dover and Calais, to try and stop there being some sort of pile-up from the border from France. So this includes medicines and important infrastructure coming into the UK. Now, Boris Johnson and the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Sajid Javid, did say that they were going to put this amount of money at the border, but nobody knew where it came from. And we now know that it will be borrowed. The Treasury did respond to these concerns, and they basically said that when Sajid Javid gives his budget, which is expected imminently, he will only focus on domestic issues. But it is still a major concern, although the government are saying that these organisations and some business leaders are trying to scaremonger. But it just shows how deeply concerning it is. Also within the IFS report, they suggest that the Bank of England, in the wake of a no-deal Brexit, will have to stimulate the economy. So there will be a shock to the economy imminently, but then, of course, it will lead to years, potentially 2 years of austerity. So not good whatsoever. Really scary, I must say, news coming out of the UK economy over the past couple of days.
Well, don't get too scared, Juliana. I'm sure that there's still better days ahead despite all that. But let's talk about Pizza Express, which appears to have responded to reports that it has reportedly hired financial advisors ahead of a meeting with lenders to review its debt situation. What's been said?
Well, yesterday I spoke to Bosun about this story, that Pizza Express, one of the most loved but less frequented restaurants in the UK, was in serious trouble and did have a meeting with their administrators. They're in debt to the tune of £1.1 billion, and it's estimated that's £1 million per restaurant that they own. A lot of people love this restaurant. It is very popular, and there seemed to be a social media campaign with the hashtag Save Pizza Express. And Pizza Express responded to these claims. They put out a really quite glossy video, which is worth our viewers looking at, basically saying that, you know, there's no need to be alarmed, that they're happy that they're still loved and that they will be still making dough. So it seems to kind of squash any rumours that they're likely to go under. But some analysts are saying, you know, Pizza Express need to take this warning pretty seriously. They've also even compared them to Thomas Cook, because, of course, Thomas Cook were Chinese-owned. They had piling debt, but they had a big name. So if they don't sort out their debt, they could be in serious trouble.
I'm sure that won't stop you from still grabbing a slice of pizza all the same. But just before you go grab that pizza, Juliana, give us a sense of today's stocks and currencies performance so far.
Of course, in the city, as I was saying, every meeting, every working lunch on Brexit is causing anxiety and changing things. But let's have a look at the numbers specifically. At intraday, the FTSE All-Share is up 0.46%. The FTSE 100 is up 0.56%, and the FTSE 250 up at 0.01%. In currencies, now, Michel Barnier, he said the deal is still likely, and that saw the sterling jump against the dollar. So at this precise moment, the British pound is up on the US dollar by 0.03%. It's down on the euro by 0.21% and up on the Japanese yen by 0.29%, Bissy.
Thanks, Juliana. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Thank you.
When Business Incorporated returns in a moment, we'll see what the IMF has to say about Nigeria's economy in 2019. Please stay with us.